What would you say is the hierarchy of intraday versus multi-day VWAP? Which takes precedence? Even though it seems like this should have a very crystal clear answer, the problem is I've seen both intraday and multi-day take precedence in certain scenarios. What I've found is that, I mean, you have to adjust your time frame of expectation too. So you can have a really strong intraday VWAP, maybe a bullish trend up, but in a declining multi-day VWAP environment. Does that mean you shouldn't go long because we're in a declining environment? Not necessarily. We are day traders, right? We're looking for a short-term opportunity. Even if that's a move up to a declining VWAP, if that's the opportunity we're presented with, and we think the risk reward is appropriate, then absolutely. However, are there times that I would take, let's say, or I would not take an intraday trade, knowing that there's the 5-day or a major VWAP resistance overhead? Let me say it this way. I don't think I'd get on the opposite side of my intended trade just because there's a big multi-day VWAP overhead. But would I be more cautious or wait for more confirmation of the trade I had been setting up, knowing that there's additional resistance overhead? Yes, absolutely. It's like take it into context, but maybe don't think about it like precedence or one of them is stronger than the other. Something that's important to remember is that the longer a VWAP goes on, the slower it's going to be, the less it's going to react to new movement. Right? As the cumulative calculation gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, it's no longer a drop in the bucket. It's a drop in the swimming pool. It's a drop in the ocean, right? New volume data really doesn't matter that much because we've got such a big calculation over which we're comparing that bar's volume to the total, especially when you get outside of 20 days or something like that. So, you know, a long-term VWAP is not going to be very responsive or reactive, whereas a newer, shorter-term VWAP, it's going to be very spry and sprightly, right? It's going to move very aggressively. It's going to be very responsive compared to that longer-term VWAP. So does a shorter-term VWAP better reflect and respond to market action? Yes, absolutely. Does that mean that we won't find broad or general support or resistance around a 5 or a 20-day VWAP, for example? Those things can both be true. As I was saying before, we can have a bullish intraday in a bearish or sideways macro environment. And balancing those two, or more than two, as we get to, you know, even other time frames, you know, that's the challenge of trading, right? You have to match up your trade assessment with the amount of time you think you've got to make that trade happen in the context of the technical picture that we're seeing on both short, medium, and long-term charting. Yep, lining up VWAPs on multiple timeframes for stronger setups. So what I found is that you rarely are going to get, and here I'm going to go back to drawing on this example. This is very unlikely that the example I'm drawing would ever occur, but let me just hypothesize. Let's say there was another VWAP that was coming right down to about this same price, and we rallied right up to it before rejecting. I think that's what everyone would want, kind of confluence of VWAPs working together. It's very rare that that's going to happen, that VWAPs are going to be in the same place unless they're launched from about the same time. Like I said, VWAPs, as they get longer and longer, are not as responsive. Like a cross of VWAPs, that's another question from later in the queue. Yeah, crossing VWAPs don't really matter to me. I don't think that's indicative of anything in the same way you might expect a short-term moving average cross to signal something. So it's really rare we're going to get that kind of confluent setup, but when it does happen, it can be very powerful. It's much more likely that we're going to get something like maybe there's, and again, I'm drawing random hypotheticals. Don't rack your brain too hard trying to figure out what VWAP I'm referring to, right? Let's say there's a deviation band set from another VWAP that intersects at the same time as price. It's coming right up to the red VWAP we have here. So on the red VWAP basis, this would be a type 1 short, down and away from the VWAP. But on the basis of these deviation bands, this would be a type 2 short, down and away from the white deviation band lines. So there will be some confluence that occurs. It just may not be a VWAP and a VWAP. It might be a VWAP and deviation bands. And that's obviously why I'm such a fan of deviation bands. They absolutely matter in ways that people who are just sitting around waiting for VWAPs to touch or for price to cross a VWAP, you're going to be sitting on your hands for days or weeks or months at a time with these longer term VWAPs. With these slower, longer term VWAPs, you will probably need to launch follow-up VWAPs or more aggressive VWAPs to try to fit to or understand the chart in front of you. So an example would be, let's say we had, just for randomness sake, let's say we had launched a VWAP all the way back here. So we've got the VWAP that's visible on our chart currently. Notice that as the market rejects and then effectively rejects again at the VWAP, we start pulling away from the VWAP and threatening to break down below this prior low. And as we do, and we create more and more separation away from the VWAP, the main VWAP, if you will, it's almost like we should try and launch a VWAP from the last point at which we intersected with or nearly intersected with the main or controlling VWAP. So what do we think this kind of looks like? I'm just guessing here. I'm going to kind of draw what I think. Whoops, bear with me. I'm guessing that it looks something like that, right? It probably slopes a lot more strongly down during this earnings gap down. But so let's do this real fast. What day would that be? It's going to be October 9th. Okay, so I'll move this out of the way. Date VWAP. Let's turn on. Oh, I'm an idiot. Turn off the adaptive VWAP. Did I draw that correctly? I have it set to days ago. Look, I just made, I'm the one who coded this study, and I'm still making these errors. Sorry, guys. So we actually have to go and set this to the raw date input to get it to take the appropriate date input. And then when we click, there we go. So I was pretty accurate for that first stretch of the VWAP, but look at how much more aggressively it pulls down and away from prior price. So now we can go back in, turn on the adaptive VWAP. So we have the original VWAP we were looking at. And there we go. Now notice, again, this is not a chart I have prepared or like charted out quite a bit in advance. I just gauged that we were going to need a more aggressive or responsive VWAP from the latest or last touch before we really created separation between us and the controlling VWAP. So launching a VWAP from that point, whoa, look at this rejection. Look at this rejection. And furthermore, using the same kind of principles, wouldn't you agree that here we have some fast lane activity? It tries to get up in the slow lane. One more big barf before it finally retreats out of the fast lane and into the slow lane. And look at the behavior difference between these two types of market, right? We've got strong trend. That's why I'm drawing this white box around. Big directional movement. We've got the slow lane falling asleep, right? Going mostly sideways, stuck between the VWAP and the -1 deviation band. So if you kind of recall to last week when I had said VWAP isn't just a way of getting in trades, it's a way of identifying what type of market you're dealing with, and therefore how to adjust your expectations accordingly. And we could keep doing this too. I mean, we could continue iterating further and further. Maybe we would launch a VWAP from this day where earnings and a big gap down started. I would also like to know about a VWAP from those lows. I think we had that previously, but I'd want to make sure I apply that as well. And furthermore, we could even apply the same principles to here and here, drawing a VWAP that would offer us likely some resistance until we break above it, and then threatening to hold support. If that support holds and we remain above this VWAP, then what was resistance is now going to become support.